A final question, a sensitive question, and it's a political question. It's a substantive question. I don't want to talk about your marriage. I know that there are issues there. Your husband, George Conway, he's a lawyer.
Did you just say?
Your husband, George Conway.
Did you just say there are issues there? You don't want to talk about marriage?
I don't want to talk about. No, I don't want to talk.
Why did you say that?
I don't want to talk about your marriage. I don't want to talk about I want to talk about a substantive point that your husband, George Conway, made. He was on television all day yesterday during the first day of the impeachment hearings, and he said this about the President of the United States. I just want your reaction to the substance of what he said.
So before you play the clip, which I haven't seen, why? And why are you doing that?
Because he's a legal scholar, he's a lawyer, and he was really going after the President of the United States, and he was all over television yesterday.
And come on.
I just want you to.
And he's married to me?
Well, you know, he happens to be married to you. What's wrong with that?
You can run the clip of Jeffrey. He happens to be married to me. That's bizarre.
Correct. But he's also a legal scholar. He's got a substantive point. Listen to
I like Jeffrey Toobin's point. Your senior legal analyst. I loved his point on CNN yesterday. We don't have to play a competitor's clip. You could just play the CNN clip where Jeffrey Toobin said it's a problem that Taylor and Kent never met Donald Trump. He said to Jake, it's a problem.
I'm not disagreeing with Jeffrey.
Jake Tapper said something
I'm not disagreeing with either.
They might have to meet the whistleblower, at least talk to him or him in private, because you have to be able to confront your accused.
Right.
But you should not have just said to your audience, I don't want to talk about your marriage, quote, I know there are issues. Why would you say that? What is it that
I don't want to talk about your marriage.
Why would you say there are issues?
Listen to what your husband said. I'll play the clip.
The problem with Donald Trump is he always sees himself first. Trump is all about Trump. And that's why it was inevitable he'd get himself into the soup once again. And that's what this is all about. He was using the power of the presidency in its most unchecked area, foreign affairs, to advance his own personal interests as opposed to the country's.
All right, that's a serious allegation, a serious charge. He was using the power of the presidency, its most unchecked area, foreign affairs, to advance his own personal interests as opposed to the country's.
That is his opinion. And I don't think MSNBC was lacking for anti-Trump voices. And we've heard things like that said on CNN for 3 years. What you just quoted is said every single day by other voices, but you wanted to put it in my husband's voice because you think somehow that that'll help your ratings, or that you're really sticking it to Kellyanne Conway. And let me make very clear, you didn't stick it to Kellyanne Conway. I think you embarrassed yourself. And I'm embarrassed for you, because this is CNN now. And now the
Kellyanne,
news is what somebody's husband says.
Do you know how many
network.
times we spoke about, James Carville and Mary Madeline, a Democrat and a Republican, happily married individuals who totally disagreed on all sorts of political issues.
Really,
do you know how many times? Do you know how many times I would ask them on television about the differences they had? They didn't get into a sensitive discussion as long.
I'm not in a sensitive discussion. You are.
Mary Madeline and James Carville, they
smiling.
would often totally disagree on television. They would have a serious discussion. I was just trying to get you to react to this allegation that the president was using the power of the presidency, its most unchecked area, foreign affairs, to advance his own personal interests as opposed to the country's.
Sure.
And you said fairly, you disagree.
I respectfully disagree,
that's
and I'll
fine.
tell you why. And you know who else disagrees? You know who else doesn't have information, evidence of that? Are the people who testified yesterday.
This is Kellyanne Conway not exactly responding well to a question by Wolf Blitzer about a comment made by her husband, George Conway. And look, I get that Kellyanne's brand is being disingenuous, but are we really supposed to pretend that the senior advisor to the President of the United States and her husband, both public figures, now on complete opposite ends of the political spectrum, making public statements contradicting each other, isn't newsworthy? Is it really that shocking to Kellyanne that she bristles at the very notion that people could possibly want to know her thoughts on that? And look, in fairness, she has the right to privacy, but the press also has the right to ask her opinion, given that she and George are both public figures. So spare us the pearl clutching. And yet the indignation suddenly disappears when she gets to settle back into her job and pretend that the president's crimes aren't crimes. Here's Kellyanne pretending in that same interview that the emoluments clause of the Constitution doesn't apply to foreign governments spending money at Trump's hotel that he still owns and profits from, because, and I quote, it's a great hotel.
The news is that the Trump International Hotel is going to be leased, and they're pitching that all these foreign governments have been spending a lot of money at the hotel.
They have. It's a great hotel. Have you been there? The food is delicious. The hotel's great. It has proximity to many places.
It refers to the emoluments clause that while the president is in office, he shouldn't be making a profit. His family shouldn't be making a profit as a result of that's in the Constitution.
Well,
yep, I'm sure the framers totally meant for there to be an exception in the case that the hotel that the president was using to self-deal was super nice. Now, after the tantrum, she eventually deigns to acknowledge Wolf's question regarding Trump using the power of the presidency to advance his own personal interest, and per usual, does what she does best. She actually claims that not only does she disagree, but that George Kent and Bill Taylor, both of whom testified at the House Intelligence Committee's impeachment hearing, also disagree, and that quite literally could not be further from the truth.
What interest do you believe he was promoting, Mr. Kent?
I believe he was looking to dig up political dirt against a potential rival in the next election cycle.
Ambassador Taylor, what interest do you believe he was promoting?
I agree with Mr. Kent.
It's like Kellyanne doesn't know that the hearing was televised. George Kent said verbatim that Trump was looking to dig up dirt against a political rival in the next election cycle, and Bill Taylor agreed. So I'm not sure how Kellyanne squares her claim that they don't think Trump used the powers of the presidency to advance his own personal interests with the fact that they said outright that he was using his powers to advance his own personal interests. But I guess her paycheck's good enough to make her say just about anything. And to be honest, it's a shame that Kellyanne doesn't have the same level of outrage for outright corruption and criminal behavior as she does for a reporter asking her to respond to a public statement made by her husband on TV. Her sanctimony would come across as a little more genuine if she was even a fraction as bothered when the president attempted to extort Ukraine to secure the promise of an investigation into Joe Biden, when Trump withheld millions of dollars of American taxpayer-funded military aid to a country trying to defend itself from Russian aggression, when the president knowingly hid the summaries of those very calls because he knew they were incriminating, when the president allowed Rudy Giuliani to act as a shadow State Department and circumvent national security protocols to facilitate that probe into Biden. Nope, she somehow finds it in herself to let those things slide. It really is too bad that Kellyanne can't bring herself to get worked up about something that truly matters if she's gonna grandstand with self-righteous indignation on national television, because then we might actually buy it.